Let us start the session by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. So page number 55, paragraph 20. And what bhikkhus are the influxes to be abandoned by removal? Now, through the sutta, we have talked about the influxes, the different types of influxes that arise. And in the previous class, we discussed five different categories of influxes that can be abandoned by seeing. That is one. Influxes that are to be abandoned by restraint. That is two. Influxes to be abandoned by reflective use. That is three. Influxes to be abandoned by endurance. That is four. And I wonder whether I mentioned this. The pain endured or experienced during meditation would also fall under this, right? Would also fall under this. I hope that's clear, isn't it? Why it would fall there. Does anyone wish for me to explain why it would fall under that category? The pain of meditation? You all right? Okay. So I can't see anything. So Lakshmi? Samantha?
Bhante, can you explain it, please?
All right.
Yeah. I think enough meditation falls.
Yes, okay. Right. The influxes to be abandoned by endurance. I've used the word, as I remember in Sinhalese, I think I've used the word victory over the seat, right? Or being victorious over the seat. The Sinhala word for that, which usually these theros use, it'll come to me. I can't remember the Sinhala, but it'll come to me. Now, what is explained by winning over the seat? Now, this was specifically, this specific word, how it starts within the forest tradition in Sri Lanka, is from Venerable Aridhamma. Actually, Venerable Aridhamma's teacher, Venerable Matra Shri Jnanarama Mahathera, where he explains that in order to jump across the different hurdles which arises, the first hurdle that we all face is the illusionary hurdle of the body, right? The illusion, why I choose to use the word illusionary is because the mind tends to blow whatever sensation that arises to a proportion that it is really not. And that is done by the kilesas. That is done by the influxes. That is done because of those hindrances that are at play in each and every part of time, which we go through during our meditation. As we endure through that part, as we endure through that pain, reinstating, refocusing, reverberating our attention to the object that we are working with reinstates the idea that the object or the focus becomes primary rather than the usual attention that we would give the hindrance, or that mentality or that sensation, sanya, perception, whatever, which is fueled by that which has a hindrance behind it. That is the reason that enduring through the pain of meditation also falls within the influxes to be abandoned through endurance. Through endurance. You endure. And to those of you who have come to that part of practice, where when you now are able to, or when you are able to bring yourself into a state of mind where you choose to endure, you are able to endure, and you have endured, now the period of your sittings, the time period, the scale of your times expand, it increases. The pain that you now felt at a certain degree of time, you do not feel any longer, right? The difference of emotions or the different sort of shortcomings that one would face with regards to time does not now arise. It doesn't arise. And you realize these subtle changes. Those are all because of the results of your endurance there, right? The results of your endurance there. That is why it is said that influxes to be abandoned by endurance also includes the victory over the seat of meditation, right? Moving on. Then we discussed last time the influxes to be abandoned by avoidance, right? By avoidance. Now, today we are going to discuss the influxes to be abandoned by removal. And what bhikkhus are the influxes to be abandoned by removal? Here, bhikkhus, a monk, wisely reflecting, does not tolerate an arisen thought of sensual desire. Okay, tolerate. This tolerate should not be taken with the same, to hold the same meaning as we would colloquially use the word tolerate. I can't tolerate you. I cannot stand that person, right? That is not the sort of the context by which this word tolerate is used, right? Because when we would usually use the word tolerate, it comes with a sense of anger, right? It comes with a sense of trying to dispel something or to push away something or to not being able to stand the existence of something, right? Here, how does not tolerate an arisen thought of sensual desire. He abandons it, he removes it, he makes an end of it, brings it to now. Now, here, this toleration or not standing or not becoming one with the thought of sensual desire arises, remember, it always must arise with a sense of wisdom. None of these abandonments can be done by the same hindrances, remember. You cannot fight sensual desire with violence. You cannot fight sensual desire with ill will. Neither can you fight sensual desire with sensual desire. I think that's a given though, right? You cannot fight or go against any one of these influxes that arise with the mind with the other parts of the influxes. Remember that these influxes, when one comes, the others follow. Although we are categorically speaking of it in different categories, remember the arising of one category of influxes paves way for all the rest to come. Right? It is like marrying a Asian man or woman. You are not only marrying that woman or man, you marry the whole family. Right? Everyone comes. It is the same thing here. Right? It is the same thing here. You cannot think, okay, I've got a problem with lust, so I'm going to deal with lust. I've not got much of a problem with ill will, so I'm not really going to pay attention to ill will. You cannot do that. And this tolerance here, it is not in any way to say that you are now using a sense of dosa towards that mind which has arisen together, or which has sort of facilitated this sensual desire or one of the other influxes to arise. This tolerance is practiced by way of sati, right? By way of sati. Remember, this sati, the reason that sati continues to appear again and again in our practice, regardless of sati being just one chetasika, a part and parcel of samadhi, is because sati has this incredible ability of giving powers to something, right? It is like the queen's knighting sword, right? It sort of enriches, empowers something, right? Anything that it sort of arises within. Due to that reason, sati becomes a forerunner in a place of this sort, where because of the sati, the predominant factors allowing those hindrances of influxes, specifically talking, influxes to sort of propagate, for that to stop and for something else to propagate, right? In the beginning, how we are all going to be able to do this is to propagate a different quality other than the first. Do you understand? So for example, if it is, let's say, greed, if we talk about sensual desire, greed, if that is what we are trying to tackle, the first thing that we would be able to effectively do in our practice is to guide our attention from one part to a different part. And this different part is wholesome. That is what we usually do, right? We want to let go of something. I mean, dana, isn't it? I mean, in its most simplistic, most basic way of practicing, you're clinging on to something. What do you now do? You develop a sense of liking. You develop a sense of liking towards the act of making other people happy through what you have earned with your sweat and your blood, with your time, right? And you get used to creating a sense of joy with this sort of giving, right? You have now switched. However, as we go along the path, we realize this switch effectively does not need to take place, right? That this switch effectively does not have to take place. We do not understand this in the beginning, for sure. It is not a mundane person's mentality that we can sort of let go of something without anything else. It is as if one is able to let go of something without any knowledge backing that decision up. One just let goes, right? It is almost as impossible a task as that which is done later on when we develop in our practice. This happens, or this has to happen, because as practitioners, we can't be bouncing from one extent to the other. We realize that these influxes arise, but we do not we do not get rid of that attachment to the influxes by attaching into something wholesome as well. Not to say that we are going to deny it. However, we do not need the wholesome to get rid of the attachment that we have to the unwholesome. Right now, we need unwholesome to get rid of, we need wholesome to get rid of the unwholesome, or else it's absolutely difficult, right? This is that process that we motivate ourselves, our minds, right? He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will. He abandons it, he removes it, makes an end of it, brings it to now. Now, all right, brings it to now. So we have the not tolerating, he abandons it, he removes it, and he makes an end of it and brings it to now. Now, when we talk about abandoning, removing, making an end of it, remember the way that the mind works, the more that you engage with something, now we know this, we are practitioners, we know this. The more you try to engage with something, the more distress that something causes you, right? Or the more friction that you would have with that specific object, right? The more friction that you would have with that specific object. Here, in the sense of sati, driven by prajna, with sati, driven by prajna, here it is as you are separating from one influx, right, and stabling yourself in a more wholesome state of mind, this driving away, this act of being sort of pushing away, or this act of changing the predominance from unwholesome to wholesome is fully re-established by panya. That is where the abandons it, removes it, makes the end of it comes to play, right? Or else, without the aggregate of panya, it does not become possible to really work with that mentality and not get attached to it, right? You might be thinking, oh, what is he talking about? But what I'm talking about is essentially the intrinsic qualities of that moment, which leads to the breaking away from that kilesa, right? Breaking away from that kilesa. Because we need to understand how is it that we can work with this influx in a way that we do not again get caught by the influx. Remember, we are prapancha beings, right? It is very much a part of us. This is the panya, again, one of my cooking examples, is like oiling your hands before working with a dough. It really is. It keeps it from sticking onto the hands. Now you're working with it. But that is made possible by that sense of wisdom, which now works in everything. That is why this part, people would go to say, you don't need the Dhamma, you don't need to study, you don't need to, what nonsense. How are you going to do all of these things without the Dhamma? Absolutely nonsense. You cannot. We are not that intelligent. We might think so. The reason that we are not that intelligent is because we are defiled. We have all these other things which are arising and passing away, which really sort of delivers us away from anything which is enlightening, right? So moving on. Bhikkhus, while influxes, vexation, and fear may arise in one who does not remove such things. Okay, Yes, Dil, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just a bit. Bante, where exactly, or is there any connection between what we said about these abandoned things with Adinava, Asadi, and Nisarana? Is
Okay.
that
Yeah, we'll come to that. Right. Now, um, because while influxes, vexation, and fever may arise, and fever may arise in one who does not remove such things. Now, as we have now, as we continue to meditate each and every day, trying our very best with every retreat that you would go to, that we would go to, with everything that you would do towards the attainment of a state of mental calm, clarity, nibbana, whatever it is that you do, there are certain emotions that one would feel, and these emotions have been accounted for within the doctrine as well in the Buddha's teachings, where one would feel a sense of fear in different parts of the practice. In different parts of the practice. This fear can be related to as the fear of the unknown, the fear of uncertainty, right? The fear of not knowing what is going to happen next. These different types of fears that arise, right? You might have fears of, what is going to happen to my family if I was to attain Nibbana? What is going to happen to my house, my wealth, my riches, my cars, my house, all of these things. These things arise, right? For the monks, it would be if I attain Nibbana, what is going to happen to my temple? Right? So all of these things, these are parts and parcels. These are part and parcel of this journey that one would experience. Even, for example, when you are going through acute amounts of pain, not acute also, sometimes just pain. The subtle pains, even, remember we all had those subtle pains that we were really worried about. We really thought those pains were going to crack us into two, right? But they were really subtle compared to the great pains that we experienced later on during our meditation. However, all of those sprung from fear. Any sort of fear that you have towards death, towards losing something or someone, towards not being able to do the usual things that you do, all of these fears arise from these three influxes, right? It arises from the ashravas, right? Remember, whilst during a high of the ashravas, one feels powerful, one feels completely like the top of the world. Remember, it has a crippling factor which starts kicking in. And the more that one is within the ashravas, one also starts crippling oneself, right? One also starts crippling oneself. It is, I think, in certain journals, yeah, and even in certain sort of places, it is talked about how even at the time of death, how people who have never prayed in their lives, how people who have never believed in God, how people have never had a religion, how people have never had anything to do with the spirituality and the unknown, now at their deathbed start praying. They start doing something spiritual. They start buying crystals to lay by the sides of their bed, which is often done in the West these days, right? They do all of these things. All of that arises through that fear, which has not through specifically whatever life that they've lived, specifically from the ashravas, any sort or any sort of caliber of ashravas that arise, the influxes, right? The influxes. Now, moving on. Even so, there are no influxes, vexation, or fever in one who removes them. These bhikkhus are the influxes that are to be abandoned by removal. Influxes to be abandoned by cultivation. And what bhikkhus Bhavana Pahatabba Asava, right? And what bhikkhus are the influxes to be abandoned by cultivation? Here bhikkhus, a monk, wisely reflecting, cultivates the awakening factor of mindfulness, dependent on solitude, dependent on fading away of lust, dependent on cessation, ripening in the letting go, right? Ripening in the letting go. Now, you know, when we observe, right? Now, when we observe an ashrava, a state of mind, because of the way that we are conditioned, the way that we have lived, the way that we continue to live, the thoughts of the society and the world that we live in, we look at the present moment, we observe, we learn the present moment in the way that it is spoken of, the present moment. The present moment. For us, the present moment is a moment, right? And really, the present moment should not be seen through the eyes of that specific moment of time. Because in that specific moment of time, it is Atma, right? In that specific moment of time, it is Atma. I mean, we've all been here. We've all done it. We've all, if anyone, I think anyone who has not really thought about it or not really gone deep into Dhamma or even gone into sort of experiential meditation would assume that when we talk about the present moment or moment of time where we are now trying to be aware of, we are equating that experience to the experience of being able to observe a minute second or a microsecond or whatever it is that we would call the shortest subset of time that we are able to physically record. However, it is not just that. Because in that moment of time, what we are now doing is, if Dhamma was peanut butter, we are applying, and Dale's face, my gosh. If Dhamma was peanut butter and time was the bread, we are applying peanut butter on bread. That is what we are doing, right? We are applying this timeless Dhamma in that space, which is all about Anatma, into something, into a mold, which is Atma. That was the reason I sent you actually the talk in the morning. I don't know whether you listened, right? The talk in the morning, I love Alan Watts, of course. The talk in the morning with Alan Watts, where he expresses the nature of how the present moment sort of vibrates into a sense of tranquility and peace in that moment, depending of course in that person's mind. However, regardless of whatever state of mind a person has, if the person has the power, the mental ability to come into a state to observe that present moment is always empty. It is always free. Why? Because we live in the past and the future, usually. We live in the past and the future. You're cognizing, you're putting together data and evidence that has been cognized previously, and we compare this data in order to come into a final conclusion about what this data holds at this present moment of time, right? At this present moment of time. In now, the awareness that we have over lust, over emotions, or over sort of these qualities such as lust, that we would often then through Dhamma sort of dissuade ourselves from, the moment that we look at it as a permanent existence within the mind, just like time, just like the present moment, we are doing the same thing to lust. We are trying, it is almost as if this is our existence, we have a sticker or something which is a hardbound sticker, and we are trying to remove it. But remember, the only way that you're going to remove that sticker now is by tearing a hole on this page. By tearing a hole on this page. It's so difficult. It is almost impossible. Why? Because now this is important, this is really important, because with every attention or every sort of justification of prajna that you do at that moment, you're also in a way re-instigating its existence upon the paper. Do you get what I mean? Because having that idea, okay, I'm observing, this is me, I'm observing, this is my existence, right? I'm observing, there's lust that has arisen. The lust is like a sticker in the middle of the paper, right? The moment that I am focusing on this lust as an existing phenomena, as a phenomena that is really there, whilst I am telling it's not there, I am also saying it is there. So it is really like I am giving and taking. And at the end of the day, I am at the same place. Why? Because I've been doing this. I'm saying it's not there, yet it's there because it is real. Because I'm perceiving that object which is there as an existing phenomena. Right? Again, what enables that phenomena to exist? Atma. Right? First of all, first mistake, the place of its existence is considered as something which is there at that moment. The truth is, it's not. It is a mechanism, the different mechanisms which run allow this to be what it is. Right? Now, at this present moment in time, right, there's a different temperature outside, there's a different temperature inside. There are maybe clouds, there may be stars, there may be the moon is outside, maybe, I don't know. It's wet outside, maybe it's raining, maybe there's wind. All of these now, the Weather Channel would say, okay, winds, gust, all of that, right? However, there are millions of different mechanisms which allows for this weather to be it, or to be what it is. But seeing the weather as one, whilst we, in our Dhamma minds, we know, okay, it's many different mechanisms, the sense of Atma coming there means that it is reinstating the values of Atma while trying to come out with the result of Anatma. It's not going to happen. The consideration of that property should be done as nothing, not as something which is. How do we feel about that?
So Bhante, basically you're saying before you realize the state of Sakkaya Ditthi and break that first fetter of the so on, you have to actually fake it till you make it to something. So you have to say, then you're saying that you have to say, right, we know that it doesn't really exist, and come from that point, because otherwise, when you put attention on something, that's what grows. So if you don't come...
No. Remember the naughty mind and the awareness mind? It is really something like that, right? Where you know that there is a process, you're disattached, right? Where you're disattached, you know that it is a process which is going on with, where you are noting now what is happening, right? And that process is similar to this. where when you are instigating a pattern of thought through your meditation, through contemplation, we instigate a pattern of thought rooted in Atma. What we then need to do, or then what we rather ought to do, is to cut the instigation of Atma within that contemplation, right? We cut the instigation of Atma within that contemplation. So really, we allow the prajna to take its course rather than trying to sort of label something, whatever it is that you want to label it, right? So that process becomes very much similar to the noting mind and the awareness mind, right? To the noting mind and the awareness mind, where you are not trying to instigate anything here, right? Because why? The Atma is not something that you are now trying to support. We are not trying to support the Atma. This is not about Dil and others. This is not about getting rid of your Atma before Arahanthood. No, you can't do it. But just because you can't do it does not mean that you have to keep on doing it. Do you get what I mean? Right? What you keep on doing is, with the contemplation of Anatma, you're pushing the contemplation of Atma. We don't have to push the Atma. Just let the wisdom do what it does to what is, to realize the Anatma, but we don't have to push the Atma into it. Right? So it is really what Aryananda Hamduro, who is Aridhamma Bhante's second in charge, he used to tell me this thing. Yeah, I never understood him actually. Every time that I went to the monastery and asked him, Bhante, what is Vipassana? What is Vipassana? I never understood him because, I was young. I was 14 years old, and he was like, just let it happen. I was like, let what happen? I remember asking him, let what happen? And he would be like, let it happen. Again, I would be like, let what happen? Bhante, what? So I didn't really get it, right? But really, this thing that we do, where we sort of we marinate something, we season something. In a similar way, this Dhamma that we learn, we must really allow it to season us, right? Because that is that passive action which is now going to create, or which is now going to aid you when you're not supporting the Atma, right? When you're not supporting the Atma, if I don't know whether this is already happening to some of you, right? Maybe it is. When you face different adversities of life, big or small, the Dhamma, it is not by sort of ethical constraints or moral constraints of society that you're now judging the situation. You're judging the situation by Dhamma. Automatically almost, right? Automatically almost. In the same way, this Dhamma needs to become so comfortable within you in that sense, which would allow that sort of pattern of thought to flow, right? Now, however much we might talk about, for example, the awareness of the breath, for example, people, even if you give the most perfect explanation, you have to go through it, you have to muck it up, you have to start again, and you will start again until you finally find the balance for yourself, where you are able to finally observe the breath. And we all know this through experience, right? Similar with Vedana, right? You go too deep and then you come out and it's too loose. Then you try to maneuver yourself and find the right place where you are now able to observe the sensations. And when you're observing the sensations and when it's so calm, that sensation takes over the whole body. And then you try to sort of get out of that sensation through attachment. All of these things you learn through experience, to that extent, when it comes to Vipassana, what Arya Nanda Bhante was trying to tell me was, with that Dhamma that we know, whilst we put it aside, yet we do have those inclinations. Through those inclinations, of course, now your nature, you will realize naturally what anicca, dukkha, anatma is. Right? What anicca, dukkha, anatma is. If we are going to say, this is anicca, there is atma in this. This is impermanent, right? The nominative case is considered to exist at that moment. So in the mental play that we have going on, yes, we are talking about something impermanent, but there is permanence in that impermanence almost. That we really, what we do is create another concept all on its own. All on its own. It is like this meditator who was speaking about, she was going on speaking about Nirodha, that she was able to see the dissolution, right? The Nirodha. And a lot of people talk about being able to see Nirodha. People talk about being able to see Upekkha. People talk about being able to stand with absolute sort of samadhi. Usually, these people are hallucinating concepts. And that is a usual thing. That's the danger of people, for example, of you knowing what's going to come next, really, right? That's the danger of you knowing what's going to come next, because then you start hallucinating it on your own because you're looking forward to it. Remember, as long as you're going to look forward to something, there's going to be a weakness in your meditation. There's going to be something which is going to hinder the development of your meditation. Right? Why? Because of that instigation of Atma. Now, this doesn't matter in Samadhi, Samatha. Right? This doesn't matter in Samatha. This is regarding Vipassana. Yes, Samantha.
Yes, Bhante. I just want to clarify, because I've heard some people say when they see dissolution in Vipassana, they see things in front of them falling apart, you know, and then they get all scared and fearful and that sort of thing. So is that what you mean by hallucination? Because I could never understand. So if they see something and then they sort of like their own mother or father or whoever in the family breaking into pieces, I couldn't understand what they actually mean. Does that mean?
That can be a hallucination as well. That can be, well, you can't say real. However, we can push ourselves to imagine that is happening. Just like we can push ourselves, or if we believe it enough, we will imagine colors. If we believe it enough, we will imagine whatever it is that we want to imagine. Sometimes people, now these are not bad people in any way, no. These are people who really want to develop in meditation, right? These are people who really, they've been trying. They finally found a good teacher, or they finally received some good advice. They want to be able to experience this. This is through real desperation for to progress in meditation, right? But remember, we are not meditating to progress in meditation. We are meditating to attain enlightenment, right? We are meditating to attain enlightenment. So in that light, if we are doing it in that light, then these hallucinations are not going to happen. However, in the true experience of Vipassana, yes, people do crumble into sand, right? People do crumble into sand. These are ways that the mind starts talking about that specific dissolution. But remember, before that takes place, there are also certain visualizations which arises in the mind, which to sort of distract the person from that true experience of what dissolution is in Vipassana, Samantha. Right? The mind plays its own tricks as well, right? The mind plays. Now, even a nimitta can be, at one point, it is like a trick in a way, right? It is only if you are able to manage yourself right during that arising of the nimitta that you will find yourself enjoying the fruits of the nimitta, or else you will not. Right? To a Vipassana meditator who is experiencing a nimitta and who is playful about it, is the nimitta is going to be that person's downfall. Right? So, Samantha, we cannot say, actually we can, right? We can say, right? However, we can say when people are hallucinating. Even within Saturday Sunday groups, I have noticed that certain people are hallucinating, right? And this, I remember even that story which I mentioned, I think last week, of the monk who used to get angry, who used to cook for Arida Mahamudra, and he used to get angry, and he was talking about the 500 odd metta jhanas. He was also hallucinating. What metta jhanas? Right? These hallucinations are created by that need that you have, the strong need that you have, right? But remember, in that need again, there is Atma. That Atma is what creates or continues to create, right? Is what creates and what continues to create. If without that Atma, then we are able to go on to really experiencing what that vision of Vipassana or what that vision of meditation is for that person with that amount of practice.
Yeah, so basically, so when you see all this dissolution, it doesn't have to be a fearful experience, because after all, Nibbana is quite a happy experience. So one should be going along with happiness all the time, isn't it, really?
It is really, you need a really loving teacher. I wish I could tell you, Samantha, that it's nothing to fear, but at that moment, who really you can depend on is a person that you can trust and count on. You really do need that person.
Okay.
Right? Because, I mean, it can be absolutely, it is somewhat like, I mean, we've had friends, all of us have friends, some of us might have gone through depression or states of that sort. You really do need someone. You really would appreciate the support of someone when you're in a state of that sort. Similarly, because that fear is very strong. And remember, it is like your whole mind and sometimes your whole body even telling you no. Right? It really does. It really does. You will experience different, experience sudden numbness of the body. You will experience bowel problems. You will experience, there's so many different things that you will experience. You will experience pains and all of these things. And at that moment, what really comforts you is knowing that you can depend and trust. So a teacher, Samantha, that is very important. When you come into states of Vipassana of that sort, I remember there was this monk. He was quite well established in his meditation, quite high up, right? Quite high up. We knew because we used to take, again, as you know, we take Kamatana together. So we knew. And he had, after reaching a certain stage of his meditation, the meditation hall is near Venerable Pauk Siado's lodging, bungalow. And near the bungalow, there is this Bodhi tree, which was actually taken, I think, from India or Sri Lanka. And so there's this, Bodhi tree that we would, on the full moon days, and, we would go and light candles and all of that. Just for, why do we do it? We actually just do it for the fun of it, to be very honest with you. Going with our friend monks and, lighting some candles and chanting some. We actually do it for the fun of it, really, because we are all very, very strong with all the meditation. We don't need to be doing chanting or any of these things at that time, right? And this monk, so we would go there, and that day was not a specific poe day or a full moon day. So what this monk had gone to this Bodhi tree, and he had been praying under the Bodhi tree. And Pauk Sayadaw knew what was going on. He knew that this monk, in the middle of or during the duration of the meditation sessions, which is to happen, and during this period, we can't talk, we can't do anything other than be in the meditation hall or be in the bathroom. Those are the only two things that we can really do, right? When we are in that sort of area. And this monk was praying. And Pauk Sayadaw knew fear has overtaken him, right? And Pauk Sayadaw is a no-nonsense kind of guy as well, And so he comes out, and he asks, "What are you doing?" And then he says, and the monk says, "I'm just, and Pauk, he doesn't even say. And Pauk Sayadaw, from his facial expressions, from the way that he behaves, Pauk Sayadaw knows that he, being in this state of awareness, being in this state of vipassana experience, that fear has now overcome him. Now, this specifically is the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen to me after I cross this place, right? After I cross this boundary. So what did Pauk Sayadaw do? Pauk Sayadaw took him to his kuti and talked to him and sent him back on his way to his meditation, right? That was only possible because Pauk Sayadaw, was there. Thank goodness for that. Was there, and he took him in and he talked to him, and he sort of, sent him back to his meditation, and he did. He didn't go just because Pauk Sayadaw asked him to go. He went because he could now start meditating again, right? You really do need that sort of compassionate, that sort of understanding, that sort of facilitator, that sort of teacher to allow you, to support you during this time. And also remember, as you meditate and as you go above into these states, you also know that other people might not have experienced things that you have experienced. So you might have this sort of conceit issue as well, right? This conceit issue as well. And don't think that it does not happen often. It does. It happens very, very often, right? And so you are really battling a lot of forces during this time. So it is best that you sort of nurture yourself and sort of really have this sort of non-self kind of etiquette in your mind, in your being, to sort of allow yourself to sort of get rid of these unnecessary issues which are to arise in the future just because you have this connection to the Atma that could potentially arise, right? So yes, Shriyani, you had something to ask.
Yeah. Yes, Bhante. I want to know when you are meditating, you start with Anapana and you go into Samadhi state, and then you come into the Vipassana. When you come into Vipassana, do you come out of the Samadhi state completely?
Not completely.
Okay. Okay.
But it also depends, Shriyani, on how much of Vipassana you have done.
Okay.
Right? So it is a yes and a no. So let's say if you are a long-term practitioner, you have done your Samadhi, and then now you are now stepping into your Vipassana, and your Vipassana, and you're just stepping into your Vipassana, then your level is going to go down a lot. However, because of your level of Samadhi, accessing a similar stage in your Vipassana Samadhi is going to be easier because your Samadhi is a reflection of the level of your Ashravas, right? Because your Ashravas are now less, you can go into a state of equal Vipassana Samadhi very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Right? However, if you have prior Vipassana Samadhi experience, then of course it is just a matter of changing your pattern of thought, isn't it? From focus-based awareness to anicca dukkha anatma, which is then Vipassana.
Mm-hmm. And so do you do the visualization? How do you, then visualization also come into that when you do the
It depends on what level you are in, right? Now, for example, we might visualize in the basic stages, or when we are starting our Vipassana, we might visualize in terms of Kayanupassana, Chittanupassana. When we Kayanupassana, we visualize the body or another sort of smaller sort of entity that we sort of recognize as a body, and we are being aware of that body. We might visualize in the basic stage, but as we progress along, we do not need to visualize. Right? We do not need to visualize, but some people choose to continue visualizing. That is also there. Some people find it much, much more comfortable to continue visualizing. But as you grow comfortable with it, it is going to be as easy as picking up your cup of tea, really. Where you are able to enter into it and come out of, because it becomes a real part of your, like an extended arm, really. It is a part of you that you can control at will, on your volition. So the moment that you decide, okay, I'm going into meditation, you're in meditation already. Right? That is made possible by that comfort that how comfortable that you are with the practice. Right? Even now, Shriyani, you don't need much practice to empty your mind completely. Right? You just need to believe that you can. Right? You just really need to believe that you can, and you can.
Okay, thank you.
Right? So it really depends on that experience that you have. Yes, Dil.
Andre, when you were describing before about this hallucinating, is that the same as masquerading factors?
Is it the same as masquerading factors? No, it is not. Masquerading factors is you do not even know. Hallucinating factors is present right in front of your eyes, yet you choose to then believe that. Right? Masquerading factors works in a whole different way, meaning its nature is in the first place hidden from your awareness. Right? However, now when you would take, or when you would hallucinate a nimitta, the nimitta is right in front of you. When you would hallucinate the sort of a body breaking up into a pile of sand, that pile is right in front of you. Right? So we in Dhamma, we do not call it a masquerading factor, right? We call it a hallucination of mind.
But the two different things. One is directly in front and the one.
It is two different things, and also relates to two different types of mentalities, really. When we refer to a masquerading factor appears to be something when it is something completely different. In a hallucination, you are hallucinating something which is not real when it does not exist, when really it does not exist. Oh no, you hallucinate that it exists when it really does not exist. Sorry. Right? Yeah. So these hallucinations are brought by those inert needs. So don't have those needs. Just let it flow. Right? Just let it flow. And if you're in a hurry for anything, remember there is nothing to hurry about. Right? It will happen. This is something to be nurtured and cultivated, and you cannot hurry this process up. You cannot hurry this process up. Right? All right. Moving on. Any other questions that anyone might have? All right. Moving on. I hope I have not confused anyone in any way. But if you feel that you are a bit confused, please feel free to bring up your concerns. As always. So, okay, Bhavana Padda. Here, Bhikkhu, the monk, wisely reflecting, cultivates the awakening factor of mindfulness, dependent on solitude, dependent on fading away of lust, dispassion, right? Dependent on solitude. So cultivates the awakening factor of mindfulness, dependent upon solitude, dependent upon the awakening of love. Now, what is this solitude? Solitude refers to kaya viveka, right? Kaya viveka going on to chitta viveka, right? So solitude, here it does not specify. So we will have to understand it as viveka. So viveka meaning kaya viveka and chitta viveka. And usually kaya viveka leads to chitta viveka, right? Kaya viveka leads to chitta viveka. Here again, the dependent on solitude, dependent on the fading away. This solitude is important because at a state of solitude, we do not reinstate the values of Atma, right? Now, what is Kaya Viveka or bodily solitude? Is maintaining yourself in Aranyagatova, Rukkamulagatova, Sunyagagatova, having yourself in a monastery, root of a tree, or a burial ground, right? And that leads to Chitta Viveka. Of course, we can understand that is a little bit of a difficult task to practice in circumstances that we are all living in. But remember, being able to, some of you live alone, or some of you, you are not disturbed, you could possibly take that as solitude. Take that as solitude and build a life for yourself where you do not have to, or you do not feel disturbed by the things that are going on around you, right? By things that are going on around you. So dependent on fading away of lust, dispassion, dependent on cessation of suffering, ripening in the letting go of defilements, dependent on the relinquishment, right? Now, it is almost as if a chain reaction was to occur here, right? Leading from one thing to the other, leading from one thing to the next, right? And it all starts with this development of mindfulness, dependent on solitude, dependent on the fading away of lust, dependent on the cessation. Now note how they use the word dependent upon. Now, dependent on the fading away of lust. It is almost as if a part is just fading away and falling off, even without your real sort of instigation almost. You just did one thing which caused a chain reaction almost for everything else to now sort of fade away, now sort of exposing or allowing you to sort of bloom through, right? Here, that awakening is here spoken of by or through this awakening factor of mindfulness. It really is a very, very strong tool. But it's also a tool that could easily put you off something because it can be too hard when you're trying to pierce it at one spot. That is why I started with that explanation, or rather elucidation, of the present moment, right? That present moment. Because just imagine how chaotic it could be to just be in that moment, each and every time, moment of day, how difficult it could be, right? So moving on. Why is it reflecting? He cultivates the awakening factor of Dhamma invest. I think, okay, let us stop from here for today, right? I think it would be good because it is the end of, I think let's go deeper into the, rather than just going through, right, the factors of awakening, let's discuss a bit further next time, right? Let's discuss a bit further. And remember, as you are learning, as you are sort of going through this sort of this sutras like this, although it might seem like they are so far away, they are very integral parts of contemplation. They're very integral part. They are integral parts of contemplation, which allows us to really identify where or which point we stand on with regards to our practice, our meditation, right? Our practice, our meditation. But it's really sort of nailing the right point of awareness, the right point of being able to observe, without that sense, or without at the same time promoting those values of the anusaya. Just being would be the most exact English word that I could use, but just being is such a difficult task. We always want to do something, but realizing to just be, and finding that way how we bring ourselves to just be seems like the point that we are trying to really work out here, right? To try to work out. But I think we are getting close and close, isn't it? Right? We are getting closer and closer. And I think it's in a good way, right? Yes, Dil.
Under these words, right? So depending on solitude is viveka and chitta, fading away with viraga. Then this next one, the cessation is nirodha, and this relinquishment is the patinissaga, which is the 16th factor in mindfulness anapanasati bhavana. You say patinissaga asase sami sikkati, trains us such as breathing, contemplating, relinquishment. So that's the same order that it goes you're referring here. So that's clear. Then other thing, Bhante, you said you'll explain to me about asadi, adinava, and nisarana, as when you say about removing having the vinodana path. Can you explain that, please, Bhante?
Okay. When we would take the parts of getting rid of, right, which I think this part we have already gone through, right? We have already gone through. When we go through the parts of when we would go through the parts of getting rid of the ashramas, right, that process would be explained, or that process would be then directed according to the position where the meditator is at that specific moment, right? That would be then determined. Now, some would say that would be determined by the state that person feels that person is at that moment. But within the Dhamma, we find that each and every person will be going through a similar experience regardless of how or where that person starts. Right? So that Western interpretation of each person having their own experience does not stand well with the Theravada doctrine that we learn. Right? So we would have a systematic process that we would all go through. What is the first word that you want, Dil? Could you?
Asadi, adinava, nisarana.
Right. So when we would take, first of all, if we would take nisarana, first.
Okay.
The Nissarana comes through, the Nissarana is supported through first the ideation or the evaluation of the concept at hand.
Okay.
Right? The concept would then be broken down, through wisdom, as we have spoken of now. Right? That result that we explore is what we refer to as Nissarana. Meaning that it comes. Now, this Nissarana is not final, Del. Right? This Nissarana is not final. It is like a working document. It keeps on updating itself and it keeps on evolving as the data that we produce, as the experience that we have at the end of our meditation experience expands and sort of grows and cultivates and develops. Right? Nissarana. The other word?
Adinava and Asadi.
Adinava, right? Adinava is a realization of the reality of that phenomena. Right? The realization of reality of that phenomena. Meaning, understanding the reality of its circumstances. Now, the reality of its circumstances does not essentially mean dukkha, but it could essentially mean that it could be impermanent, that it could be anything else, whatever it is, that is the Adinava. Right? So here, again, this character that we see within that object is not seen as, or we do not see it as something that we have to push through into the scope of vipassana. Whatever that scope is of that moment, we see it as that Adinava that we can see with our intellect at that moment. That is why the result of it, or what we would experience as a result of it, is working. As a working document, I mean. Right? Where it keeps evolving moment to moment as we grow and develop. Right? As we continue to develop. And the other word?
Was Adinava and Asadi, I think.
Asadi. Asadi is the object of how it is speculated. Now, we understand this is all a process of realization of the object in its most realistic terms, right? The Asadi is its manifestations and the way that it causes a difference. What is the effect of the object? Right? When we have the Adinava, and in the Asadi process, what we see is the result of the object as the object is perceived at that moment. This is not to sort of say, this is not to sort of say that it necessarily doesn't have to have a negative connotation or a positive connotation, but whatever it is as a result, what does it give way to? You get it? I feel like...
Yeah, maybe because I sort of understood it very different. That's what I asked you when I was reading all this about endurance and abandon. The way I had understood, and I'm completely wrong. That's what I asked clarification. But Asadi was much more sort of like a positive thing that you sort of cling on to. But Adi, in a way, when you see the negative side, like what you said about, and suddenly the working done, neither this nor that, still a working, that I follow. But I always thought Adina was when it's like, when you say when it was, it needn't have to be dukkha, but it can be impermanent. But they are more sort of negative one. And that Asadi was the things that you kind of cling on to, like more like Kamachan, the things which are... That's my understanding, Bhante.
Adinava, the meaning of the word Adinava is reality.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Asadi is more in the sense of, now we have speculated what the reality is. Right? Now that reality in light of eye of wisdom, it can be something which is negative, or it can be something which is a backwall. Regardless, it is reality. Right? Asaddi is due to this object being what it is. What is the reality? What is the result of that object being in that state, right? Being in that state. So that could also, for some, in that moment of contemplation, as we go through the contemplation, it could be the exact opposite of what we contemplate as the Adinava of that object. It could be the result of the realization of Adinava as well. Do you get it? The result of the Adinava mentality.
So they can be positive or negative, both of them.
It doesn't matter. The thing is, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Because my understanding was that the second one was the negative, right? And the positive.
No.
No. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. We will be going into depth of the mindfulness and all of that in the next class, and we will devote that whole class for that. Next time we have next time. So thank you very much. I'm just going to